Shedeur Sanders trade rumors. I was listening to LeVar Arrington. He was on a radio show and doing his podcast, and they was talking about the Cleveland Browns quarterback position with Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson. And I want you to listen to LeVar Arrington, a former NFL player. When he was at Penn State, he was one of the best linebackers they ever.
One radio segment. One throwaway comment about trading away a quarterback the whole city just fell in love with. And within hours, Brown's Twitter was on fire. Because here's the thing nobody saw coming. The same week fans were chanting Shedeur Sanders' name, a former NFL linebacker turned radio host stood on a mic and said the unthinkable. Trade him. Trade the kid everybody's been rallying behind. And just like that, a rumor that should have died in 5 minutes turned into a full-blown storm. This is the story of how one voice, one opinion, nearly cracked open the most talked-about quarterback competition in the league. Let's rewind for a second, because to understand why this hit so hard, you have to understand where Shedeur Sanders came from. A 5th-round pick, not a first-rounder, not the guy teams were fighting over on draft night. A kid who fell, publicly, painfully, while cameras watched his face the entire time. And instead of breaking him, that fall became fuel. He landed in Cleveland with a roster that already had a quarterback under a massive contract, Deshaun Watson, a former star whose time in Cleveland had been anything but smooth. Injuries, inconsistency, a fan base running out of patience. So when Shedeur walked into that quarterback room, nobody handed him anything. He had to earn every single rep. And that's exactly what makes this trade talk so infuriating to people who've watched him grind. Because here's what actually happened behind the scenes. While outsiders were debating his arm strength, his tape, his college system, Shedeur was in the building. Early mornings, extra reps, learning to operate under center for the first time in his life, something he barely did in college. That's not a small adjustment. That's rebuilding your entire game from scratch at the pro level, under a microscope, with millions of people ready to pounce on every mistake.
The game. Now he's doing a radio show, and listen to what he had to say when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. It's the trade rumors, once again, that everybody, for some reason, is stirring up. Listen to Lamar Everton.
I don't know who came up with this crap. This idea you're going to trade Shedeur Sanders. Why? How many times have we talked about, hey, the Browns signed so-and-so?
And people did pounce. That's the other half of this story. The criticism never stopped. Analysts questioned his anticipation. They said his feet were slow. They said the arm talent wasn't special enough for the next level. Every clip, every throw got dissected like it was evidence in a trial. Some of it was fair, some of it wasn't, but all of it added weight to a kid who was already carrying the burden of an entire fan base's hope. So when word started spreading that the front office might be entertaining trade talks, that hit different, because it wasn't just a football decision anymore. It felt personal, like the one team that took a chance on him was suddenly ready to give up on that chance before it even had a real shot to pay off. Here's where it gets messy. The host laid out his logic, and honestly, some of it wasn't crazy on paper. Watson's contract situation, his final year of guaranteed money, the idea that maybe, just maybe, the front office wanted one more real look at Watson before fully handing the keys over. Add in another young quarterback from the same draft class who barely gets mentioned in these conversations, and suddenly there's this narrative brewing that the front office could flip Shedeur while his value is still high. Sell high on a kid who overachieved, get something for a 5th-round quarterback who forced his way into relevance. That's the theory, and it's spread like wildfire. But here's what the theory conveniently ignored: the human side of this whole thing. Because the second this talk hit social media, fans didn't just disagree, they erupted. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds, people pulling up stats, pulling up highlight reels, pulling up quotes from teammates who've publicly backed Shedeur since day one. The message was loud and consistent. You don't build something this promising just to blow it up over a radio hot take. And that's when the real reporting started catching up to the rumor.
LeVar Arrington speaking on about trading Shedeur Sanders from the Cleveland Browns. If the Cleveland Browns do that, which I don't believe they will, that will be a major setback for their organization. When you know you got the best quarterback on the team right now, why would you trade Shedeur Sanders? They're in a quarterback competition. And many people think Shedeur Sanders will.
Because while one voice was out there speculating about trades, people closer to the organization were telling a completely different story. According to reporting inside the building, there's been no real intention to move on from Shedeur. None. In fact, insiders describe a coaching staff that's been quietly impressed watching a developmental prospect do exactly what development is supposed to look like. Improvement, week after week, rep after rep. Because remember, this isn't a finished product walking into the league. This is a quarterback learning an entirely new style of offense, closing the gap on a starter who's dealt with his own share of setbacks. And by all accounts, that gap has been shrinking fast. People close to the situation point to real, tangible growth, better pocket presence, cleaner reads through his progressions, the accuracy that made him a household name in college, still showing up on Sundays when it matters. Is he a finished product? No, but nobody expected him to be. What matters is the trajectory, and right now, that trajectory is pointing up, not out the door. So why did the trade talk even take hold in the first place? Maybe because it's the off-season, and off-season talk needs fuel. Maybe because Watson's situation creates just enough uncertainty for outside voices to fill the silence with speculation. Or maybe, and this is the part that stings the most for fans, because doubting Shedeur Sanders has become a habit, a reflex, ever since draft night, when he watched round after round pass him by on national television. There's been this undercurrent of people waiting for him to fail, waiting for the story to confirm what the doubters said all along. But every single time, he's answered back, not with words, with work.
Let's listen to a NFL insider speak on the quarterback competition and the trade rumors around Shedeur Sanders. Let's go.
Shedeur Sanders. There's been some things circulating out there that the Cleveland Browns could be moving on from their second-year quarterback. That we all know that they're going to be looking for a quarterback in the 27 draft. They have a lot of ammo. And the future quarterback for the Cleveland Browns is not currently on the roster. We'll see.
And that's really what this whole trade rumor exposed, if you strip away the noise. It exposed how much this kid means to people who've watched him fight for a spot most players are just handed. It exposed how emotionally invested this fan base has become in a story that started with heartbreak on draft night and is slowly turning into something else entirely, a redemption arc nobody's ready to see cut short. If you've been following this journey with us, every rumor, every twist, every headline, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because this story is far from over, and you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Now here's where the story shifts, because as fast as the trade rumor spread, it started falling apart just as fast. Reports directly contradicting the idea that the front office was shopping Shedeur, sources describing a locker room where he hasn't caused a single issue, not one distraction, not one red flag, just a young player putting his head down and working, the exact opposite of a guy you'd want to trade away. And that's when the tone of the conversation online started to change. Instead of panic, you started seeing confidence. Instead of fear, you started seeing fans doubling down, reminding each other why they believed in this kid from the beginning. The jersey sales, the chants, the moments where he stayed after practice just to get a few more reps in before heading inside.
Part of the process. They're seeing him improve on these things. My understanding is they don't have any intention on trading Shedeur Sanders. I think both these quarterbacks are most likely going to be on the Browns roster come the start of the season. And they both could be on the roster for the duration of the season. He is a player that they're seeing improve, that they have under control for the next several years, and don't have a heavy financial commitment into. He has not caused any problems behind the scenes in the building that would force them to part ways with him by any.
Behind the scenes, there's been real intention behind how this quarterback room has been built. Every decision, from who's mentoring him to how his reps are structured to how patiently the staff has handled his growth, points toward a franchise that's playing the long game, not a franchise looking for an exit. Because here's the truth most outsiders miss. You don't invest this much time, this much coaching, this much structure into a player you're planning to give up on. You do that with a player you believe is going to be the face of your franchise for years. So when you really look at where this story started, a kid falling out of the first round on national television, doubted before he even threw his first NFL pass, and where it stands right now, a quarterback closing the gap in a real competition, backed by people inside the building who've watched him grow up right in front of them, the trade rumor starts to look like exactly what it was. Noise. Loud, dramatic, attention-grabbing noise, but noise that couldn't survive contact with the truth. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about wins and losses, or trade value, or hot takes on a radio show. It's about a young man who was told no more times than most people could handle, and instead of walking away, he walked into a building every single day and did the work nobody was watching. And whether the critics want to admit it or not, that kind of resilience doesn't get traded away. It gets rewarded. The next chapter of this story is still being written, and if this week proved anything, it's that Cleveland isn't ready to give up on Shedeur Sanders. Not now, not after everything it took to get here.